Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we're going to look at the Druskara crowdfunding campaign, Game Master Tools by Jeff Stevens Game. I'm going to talk about the secret limitation, a limitation of getting players to play new RPGs that we might not be thinking about today. What is one of the major things that is in the way from players picking up RPGs? Which RPGs are actually doing a good job with this? And what RPGs aren't really doing a great job? And what could they do to do a better job at not being in the way of new players playing their RPGs? Today's tip is going to be session summaries. Should you as a GM recite the session summary, or should you have your players recite the session summary? Who summarizes the previous game? What are the advantages and disadvantages of both? Where do I stand? Where does Chris Perkins stand? And where do you stand? Where do the folks watching this video likely stand? We're going to talk all about that today, and we're going to cover more questions from the Patreon Q&A, all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm Mike Shea, your pal from Sly Flourish, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing games. So last week over on Sly Flourish, I published the article Play Solo RPGs. I'm a huge fan of solo RPGs. I think they're a great way to do some RPG cross-training. There's actually one of my lazy tricks, the best lazy tricks are the ones that have multiple advantages for doing a single thing. And playing solo RPGs has many advantages. One, it is a great way to kind of fire up your improvisational muscles. Like while you're playing solo role-playing games, you are building neurons in your head that help you improvise during your sessions where you're playing with other people. They're a great way to learn a new RPG if you don't know how to play that RPG. But most of all, they're just fun. It's just fun to do. It's a great way to be a kid again and let your imagination run wild and sit with it. I don't do it enough. And more people should do it. Solo RPGs are great. Anyway, I have a whole article about that. It was published last week on Sly Flourish on Readings and Reflections. I talked all about it. The Readings and Reflections is the Patreon, dedicated hero tier Patreon podcast. So if you're a patron of Sly Flourish at the hero tier level, you get a whole other podcast. And I read the article and then I talk more about it. And we had a good 10, 11 minute discussion about playing solo RPG. So that was last week on the Sly Flourish website. Next week is the article summarizing my experiences having run a 20-level multi-5e game, what I was calling my 3x5e game. I ran a 1st to 20th level campaign over about 18 months using 3 different versions of 5e at the same table. And I wanted to share my experiences with this. What did I learn? Did it work? All kinds of things I had captured. I had talked about it on this show before, but also I wrote it up in this article. So if you want to get this article, it is on slyflourish.com, probably right now. It is also going to be going out as on Readings and Reflections. I'm going to be talking about it on Thursday for Hero Tier patrons. I'll be reading the article out loud and then talking more about it. So you'll get kind of a behind the scenes podcast where I talk about it. And on Tuesday for newsletter subscribers, it will be delivered directly to your inbox. If you are not a subscriber to the Sly Flourish newsletter, it is the best free way to stay in touch with all of the work I do. All you have to do is provide your email address. You get a free adventure generator for signing up, and you get articles like this sent directly to your inbox that include, and if you look at the bottom, includes links to things like each subject of the talk show from the previous week, patron questions, all the links that I do for this show are all in there as well. Tips, I offer 7 tips at the bottom that are my weekly tips that I think about from my own game. Related articles, all of those are on the bottom of the article and they're at the bottom of the newsletter. So it's a fantastic way to sign up. If you have signed up, great. If you haven't, you should sign up. And also, you can tell your friends. Probably, this is the algorithmic. You want to, instead of clicking the bell, instead of subscribing, you know what you can do? Tell your friends, hey, share this video with your friends, share the podcast with your friends, right? Podcasting, this is something that I don't think a lot of people know. So you might be watching this on YouTube. That's great. Thank you for watching on YouTube. Consider subscribing to the podcast. That way, you're getting every single episode, right? You can even subscribe to the podcast and then see it and go, maybe I'm going to go watch it on YouTube. But the problem is YouTube doesn't show you every show that I do. Right? You have to go to subscriptions tab. Nobody goes there. You should go to the subscription tab. But also you can subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcatcher. Now there's no algorithm in the way. It's me and you, right? You're coming directly to me. I'm giving you the show every week. So podcasting is a really good way. Newsletter, another great way, directly to me, to you. No algorithm in the way, right? It's just you and I. I send you an email every week, right? And we have these great conversations. You can reply back. You can read the email and write back and say, hey, that was dumb, right? And here's why. And I'll reply back and say, well, that's just like your opinion, man. So we can have that exchange, right? I email, I'm pretty sure this is the case. I think it's very, very rare for me not to reply back to every email that I get from people who subscribe to the newsletter, read it, wrote me a note back. I almost always write back. Person-to-person interaction, really important. So you can do that. On Patreon, speaking of Patreon, I am continuing to work on my new big secret project. 3 of the 4 main bulk packages of this new project have been sent out to patrons. It's available to hero tier patrons, and you can find links to it on your hero tier reward page. I reformatted it recently. I have now gotten to the point where the manuscript for this has been turned over to Scott Gray for us to start working on the sample chapters that we want to deliver as part of the Kickstarter. So I'm very excited about that. We picked the sample chapters out. I got a bunch of artwork, and we're starting to work on that. The fourth dump is probably going to happen in a couple of weeks. Right, I'm going to kind of put out the fourth package at that point. At which point, the entire package, the rough draft of the entire project, will be in the hands of hero tier patrons. You can talk to me about it on our Discord server on the hero tier channel. You can email me and tell me. I've had people do all of these, and they're very valuable. You can leave me comments on Patreon. If you are a hero tier patron and you have read it, and you have comments and you haven't sent them to me, please do. If you haven't read it, please take a look. I would really love your feedback on this, right? This is a very important project to me. I'm very excited about it, and it's really cool. So right now we're just calling it the secret project. It will have a name, but probably in a month or two, I think it's going to be before I will name it. I'm working on cover treatments right now. I'm very excited about the cover treatments. So really fun stuff. So if you want to kind of be involved in helping me put together this new project, hero tier subscribers to Patreon are getting full access. Basically, they're getting the whole thing. They're getting the rough draft of the whole thing. That is happening over in these big 4 packages. So that's been really fun. The feedback has been good. Very useful feedback. I got some feedback last week. Somebody was like, oh, I really love this idea you did here. I wish there was more of that. And I created 20 more of them. And it resulted in this case, it was, I don't want to spoil what it was, but like I added, I think 400 new little things. Was it that many? No, 200 little bits of useful information because of this one comment that came in. I was like, they are absolutely right. That's a really good comment, and I should have more examples of this. And I'm going to put 20 more examples of this, each one which had 10 features. So it's 10 examples for 20 different places that I added last week, and that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. So that was that's the secret project. Latest stuff going on in the secret project for hero tier patrons of Sly Flourish. Druskara. Druskara is a new Shadowdark project by Dungeon Damsel Publishing. I had the opportunity to meet the Dungeon Damsel and spouse who ran a Shadowdark game for us at Page. When we were at Page, my wife and I were both in the game, and they have already published. They published another project previously. Where was it? Called Unnatural Selection. And we got to play with some of the character options from Unnatural Selection in our game. And they have some really wild character options in that. It was really fun. I think we blew up at the end. I think one of the characters had an option where they exploded, and they did it, and we all exploded at the end. But it was really fun. Really, really, really great time. Enjoyable game. Unnatural Selection. I don't think I did a spotlight on it because it was still so close to like when Shadowdark itself had come out. And I was still just getting to understand Shadowdark at the time. And I didn't feel like I needed a whole new pile of character options for Shadowdark yet, because I felt like I had enough at the time. Now that Shadowdark has been out for some time, a couple, 2 years, I think, maybe longer for Shadowdark, right? I've run an entire 1st to 10th level Shadowdark campaign, and now I feel like is a great time to kind of expand Shadowdark into new areas. And the Druskara Kickstarter, or the backer kit, really does so. So Druskara is an entire sort of campaign. It's everything. It's a campaign adventure. It's new class options. It's new monsters. It's new magic items. There's a whole bunch of different stuff. Real high production value. I saw the Unnatural Selection book at Page, and it's a really, really good looking book. Same, very high quality. Sits right alongside your Shadowdark core books. Looks really, really good. There are videos that you can watch in the backer kit page. I will link to that. So they have a downloadable one-click preview, my favorite thing, right? They have a whole preview, 48-page preview. One-click download where you can check it out. You can see the artwork that they have in there. You can see the quality of the material that they're doing. They're doing this very cool sort of monochrome, but with a splash of red thrown in there, which I think is really neat stuff. I always love previews like this because they are the best way for you to be able to take a look at the material they're building, see the quality of the writing, see the quality of the page layout, see the quality of the art, see the quality of the design, and get a taste for it before you dive in deep into backing it, right? So I always recommend, it's rare for me to recommend you should absolutely back a Kickstarter. What I'm telling you to do is go check it out. Check out this crowdfunding campaign. Download the free sample, take a look at it, and ask yourself if this is the kind of thing that can really work well for your game. But I look at it, and I'm very impressed with it. They've got beautiful maps, cool sort of hex crawling things, events that are occurring in different places. Really kind of interesting. One of the neat things about this environment is the environment itself. The sun has been hidden, so it's dark all the time. The Shadowdark exists everywhere, including in the overland. So they're like, there's not enough Shadowdark in your Shadowdark. Here you get even more Shadowdark by having it so that even the sun itself is blocked. So looks really good. The folks that I've talked to who backed the Unnatural Selection Kickstarter really love the material that they got from there. I like this map is very cool, right? Big keyed map with lots of different encounters in different places. So I really dig it. I am, of course, a sucker for lore and location material, and it's got a lot that's going on in here. So this is the Druskara. Yeah, right. Yo, dog, I heard you like your Shadowdark. How would you like some more Shadowdark in your Shadowdark? That's kind of what's going on here. So, looks very, very neat. I'm excited to see it, and I think it looks very solid from the preview and from their previous work that they have done for Natural Selection. I think it is a solid one to look at. That is the Druskara, brutal fantasy world setting for your Shadowdark role-playing game by Dungeon Damsel Publishing. You can find a link to it down in the show notes. My friend Jeff Stevens is also running a Kickstarter campaign right now for the Game Master tools, Creating Villains in Lairs, inspiration tips, tables, and essays to help you design devious villains and dangerous lairs for your game. It has a whole bunch of essays from many, many different folks. Saga McKenzie, Jeff Stevens, Dale Kreitchley, Alex Kammer, John Hook, Ed Greenwood, Shanna Germain, Greg Marks, Teo Sabadia, Ann Gregerson, all publishers, all writers of different essays that are inside this project. So it's $4 for the PDF, $7 for the PDF plus a print-on-demand code that lets you order a print copy directly from DriveThruRPG. Really... So one of the things that occurs to me with this, first of all, all the writers sound really good. It reminds me a lot of the Kobold Guides, if you're familiar with the Kobold Guides to World Building and things like that, which are these fantastic books of essays. What I really like about this is we often lament Dungeon and Dragon magazine, right? We don't really have a Dungeon and Dragon magazine. And MCDM did Arcadia for a while. We also had Horizons magazine for a while. Unfortunately, neither of those are still in publication. D&D, EN World has Insider. It's really cool, but books like this are kind of that extension of Dungeon and Dragon magazine. I've been reading Knock recently by the Mary Mushman. I have four issues of, I think 4 or 5 copies. I think it's 5, right? Of Knock, which are sort of they're almost like the Dragon magazine annuals. They're packed with stuff. And that to me is what Dragon magazine is like. And this one feels the same way. For $4, it's kind of that magazine level price, right? $4 is a low cost, and you're getting a bunch of essays from a bunch of people who have been thinking about RPGs a lot, talking specifically about the topic of villains. That feels very much like Dragon Magazine to me, right? It feels very much like the kind of material you get in Dragon Magazine. So I think that's kind of the way to think about this one is you're not getting a supplement for your book the same way that you're getting other supplements for your RPGs, but you're getting a magazine that you're going to read and enjoy and bring some information in and kind of bring the tool set to your game. I think it's priced very reasonably. $4 is an incredibly low price. And, for this magazine-sized project. So I'm really excited about it. It's Game Master Tools, Creating Villains and Lairs by Jeff Stevens' game, available on Kickstarter. You can find a link down in the show notes. $4 for the PDF, $7 if you want PDF plus a print copy or print on demand code to be able to pick up a copy at cost, I presume. Really cool activity. Fantastic writers that are involved, and I would check that out. And again, think of it, the way I think of it is like, this is like getting a copy of Dragon Magazine, right? It's a really great way for creators in the industry, independent creators in the industry, to be able to bring a bunch of essays to you so that you can pick up the tips that they've been thinking about for a long time. I'm always interested in what it takes to get players to play different RPGs. Your group or groups may already have an RPG that you have been playing for a long time and that you love. And every so often, I run into GMs who lament that they want to try other RPGs, but their group is really familiar with the RPG that they've got. A lot of times what we're talking about is 5e, particularly D&D, either 2014 or 2024 D&D. And, you know, even with transitioning from D&D 2014 to 2024, that can be a struggle. Players already have the 2014 books. You're used to playing 2014. Everybody's used to playing 2014. Why would they want to move to 2024? But it's probably easier to get people to move to D&D 2024 because of its popularity, because it's D&D, than it is otherwise. But what happens is your groups kind of get tied into a particular RPG. You all understand the rules. You know, the rules for D&D 2014 and 2024 are very good. I think they're excellent, right? We played 10 years of D&D 2014, and I think 2024 is a net positive, right? I don't think it's like way better. It's actually a Patreon question later, but I think it's really good. So but I also want to try other RPGs, right? There's tons of really good RPGs out there, lots of them, and they're wonderful. So we have we run into resistance to run other RPGs, and there's one element of resistance that I don't blame players for at all. I'm not gonna blame anybody for anything, right? But like, there's one element to getting people to try other RPGs that is troublesome, and we're going to talk about that today. And what games do well at this, what games don't do particularly well at this. When you want to get a group to play another RPG, there's a couple things you can do. One is you want to know that your group trusts you to run a fun game. A lot of times, and I've heard this from many GMs and many players, for them to switch to a game, it's mostly like, I'm in a group, I like the GM, we're here because of the friends we have around the table more so than the game that we're playing. So once you've gotten to that stage where you're with a group, where you're playing for the friends that are there more so than the game itself, that makes it easier to say, hey, let's keep this friend group going and let's just try a different game. And the other one is to do like the puppy dog sale, which is, let's try it for a couple of sessions and see. Right? And if almost any group is like, sure, I'm willing to try just about any RPG for a couple of sessions, right? And I've done this myself, right? We're running a Dragonbane campaign right now. And I was like, we're not going to be playing Dragonbane forever. Now, my group is pretty happy with Dragonbane. I think we're having a good time with it. I don't think anybody's really mad about it. There was some resistance at first, but so far it's been pretty good. And some of that has been how I've been changing the game. And some of it has been the group getting kind of used to the game and enjoying what's been going on at the table and getting into their characters and everything else. So they like it. But I also kind of start out with, we're not going to be playing this forever. Like, we're not switching out of D&D. We're not going to say never playing D&D again, but we're going to try some other RPGs out, and I want to try Dragonbane out. So, but I'm doing that because my group trusts me to run a fun game, whatever it is. But then there's one bit of resistance, and it's hard, and that is the rule books. The rule books are a source of resistance. The issue is that a lot of times, imagine, if you will, you're like, hey, everybody, I know we've been playing Monopoly every week and enjoying that, but I'd really like to try Settlers of Catan. And they're like, oh, what's that about? Well, Settlers is like a resource game where you're kind of setting up little towns and kind of growing things, sort of like Monopoly, kind of like in that you're building little things, but also like you're getting resources, you're trading resources. There's a lot of this stuff. Oh, that sounds cool. Yeah, it's kind of neat, sort of medieval-ish game. Oh, that sounds neat. Great. You want to play? Great. Go to Target. Each of you needs to go to Target and spend $60 on the Settlers of Catan box. And they're like, what? And like, well, that's what we need to play. Each of you have to buy a copy of the game in order to play. That's kind of what we're doing with RPGs. Right? We're kind of saying like, hey, everybody, I'd love you to play this new RPG, but in order to play, I need you to go spend a bunch of money on a core rulebook for a game you've never played, and you don't know if you're going to like, and you don't know how long you're going to play it for, right? And that's a big element of resistance. And some of the games I am most excited about are games where there isn't a good way to onboard players easily with the rules themselves. Some games do a really good job at that, and we're going to look at some of the games that do that. But some games don't. And unfortunately, there are two games I am really excited about. I don't have a good way to onboard the players because either I'm buying a fair number of player guides for them, which are expensive, right? Or I'm coming up with other kind of hacky ways to get them a copy of the material so that they can build their characters and stuff like that. Or I'm asking them to spend money on it. And that's tough. With Dragonbane, it was tough. Like Dragonbane has some really good onboarding rules. You have downloadable quick start rules that you can send to people. There are pre-generated characters you can use. So there's enough with Dragonbane to kind of be able to get people started. But once you're in the campaign, you kind of need the books. And the books have spells and other things that players need. And we're continually looking up the reference. And the answer was one of my players bought a set and I bought 3. So I bought 2 copies of the core rulebook because it was on sale at Christmas. So I got them for a pretty low price. 2 copies of the rule book, and then one that came in my starter box, and then one of the other players bought a starter box. So we have 4 copies of the physical rules around the table, and that's about enough, right? That's about enough for it. But that was still 4 copies of the rule book that we needed in order to really feel like we had all of the resources. Again, there's dirty tricks like PDFs on iPads and things like that you can do, but it can be pretty tricky. So this limitation is tough, but 2 games that I want to play in the future, I kind of am struggling with this. One of them is 13th Age Revision 2. 13th Age version 2 just came out about 6 months ago or so. I have the PDF. I have the physical version of both books. It looks great. I love 13th Age. My players, about half of the players that I have already played 13th Age, and they know they're going to like it. But the player guide is $60. And there's no quick start rule set. There's no kind of here's how to make a character. It doesn't have, they have some kind of character class based character sheets, but I don't think they include like the character powers that you need. So it's making it hard to onboard. So what's my answer? Well, I'm probably going to end up buying at least one other copy of the player's guide, and then we're going to do a bunch of monkeying around to let people get access to the PDF through things like using Google Drive to share the PDF, but locking down the user's ability to download. I have a link for how to do that. I'll link to it in the show notes, but basically you can put a PDF inside Google Drive and you can share it with people by email address, but you can limit the fact that they can only view it inside Google Drive. So they're essentially getting a viewer for the PDF. They cannot download it locally. That way you're not breaking the law in allowing for downloads of a copywritten product, but you're still letting people be able to view them. 13th Age is one where I have that. The other one, which I want to play, this is kind of the next campaign I'm going to play, is Shadow the Weird Wizard by Rob Schwab. Fantastic RPG. I love Shadow the Demon Lord, and I'm very excited for it. But unfortunately, the Shadow of the Weird Wizard book is a great big book with tons of character options in it, and you really need a whole copy of the entire book in order to look at all of the options that you'd want for your character. There's no like slim volume that's just for quick play characters. There's no real good quick start rules for Shadow the Weird Wizard. So again, I'm kind of stuck with probably buying at least one extra copy of the rule book, which I'll probably just cover the cost for, and then also sharing the PDF on various iPads and computing systems using the Google Drive hack. That's not a great way to share the core books, right? This makes it tricky. Some games have done an outstanding job of allowing for shareable stuff. Daggerheart, I've been talking a lot about Daggerheart on the show in lots of different ways, but one of the things Daggerheart does that's really, really good is basically all of the information that you need to be able to build and run your character you get on your character playbook and the associated cards, all of which are downloadable for free on the Daggerheart website. The physical book itself, you really only need one copy of that physical book at a table. You can share it, and that's because the players have all of the information they need, not just to run their character, but also to make choices about their character's progression through the game. The game is designed that way. I think 13th Age could really learn from that. I think if 13th Age was doing like character folio style stuff the same way that Daggerheart did, I think it would be a lot more accessible when you have people that are that want to want to include that kind of stuff. I've mentioned Dragonbane. Again, the Dragonbane has really good quick start rules. If you really just want to play a session or two to get used to it, you can definitely do that. But once you start to get into the game, now's when you're like, well, I think we're going to need more copies of the core rule book so that you have all of like the heroic abilities and spells and things like that people have. Not everybody needs a copy, but you probably need, a copy for every 2 players or so in order to share it. Dolmenwood. I've talked about Dolmenwood in the past. Dolmenwood actually has an entire online character reference, right? So if you want to play Dolmenwood, there's an excellent player's guide, and the player's guide is only $30. So it's a very reasonable price for the player's guide. But also they have an online rules reference that's free, no sign up, no login, nothing like that, where you can go and look at all of the class information, all of the kindred information, all of the stuff that you need in order to play Dolmenwood. You can share easily. This is a really good example of what I think RPGs ought to do. Try to give as much of the player-driven rules out for free as you can and make it easy for players to be able to jump on board. The reality is, I think, that GMs are the ones that are footing the bill for role-playing games, by and large. Of course, with D&D 2024, D&D 2014, and 2024, definitely there are players who bought copies of the Player's Handbook and the other books so they could run their games. But I think that's pretty rare. I think most of the time, as soon as you step outside of D&D, maybe out of Pathfinder. Pathfinder also has a lot of player option books that people are definitely buying them. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it turns out there's more. But I have a feeling most of the time, the GMs are the one footing the bill. And one of the things that could help GMs is for us to be able to give resources to players so that they have an easier time building characters, upgrading their characters, and running their characters at the table without the need to drop $60 on an individual source book for a game that they might not be into as much, right? They might not have played it. They don't really understand it. They're not they're not excited about it like GMs are excited about it, in my opinion, right? Players generally, they love playing the game, but they'll kind of play whatever, right? Like to us, the best players are the ones that are willing to play lots of different RPGs, but they're not going to be like, oh my God. I mean, sometimes I do. I have a player for my Dragonbane game who just loves Dragonbane. He bought one of the core books. He's like, I love this. He would totally play it anywhere. He loves lots of games, right? He really loves Tales of the Valiant. He bought that. He loved Level Up Advanced 5e. He bought that. But he's also a GM, right? He also runs games, right? So GMs drop a lot on this, but players, I think it's a lot to expect players to be dropping $60 in every RPG you want to play for every RPG you want to try out. Dolmenwood did a great job with the rules reference. I recommend it. By the way, you're going to find links to all of these different resources and things like that down in the show notes. So if you want to try this stuff out, you want to see what it's like. If you're another publisher of an RPG and you want to see how other people are doing it, this is one of the ways to do it. Rocketpunch Press put out a Dragonbane RPG cheat sheet. This is a 2-page, like 1-sheet front and back cheat sheet that has a lot of the information on it that you need instead of a core book. This one, you can't replace the core book with it, but it gives a lot of the information that you would need from a core book on a single sheet that's available. It's name your own price on itch.io. I printed out a bunch of these. This helped significantly when we were building characters for our Dragonbane campaign. So again, cheat sheets like that, but like you shouldn't count on the community to do it for you. If you're making a game and you want people to play it, try to make it as easy as possible for people to play it. And try to think about that Settlers of Catan idea, right? That you buy one copy of Settlers and 5 players are able to enjoy it. I think Daggerheart did a really good job of nailing that kind of idea. D&D, Wizards of the Coast did this with the D&D Heroes of the Borderlands box set, right? You only need that one box. You don't need 5 core rule books around the table. Now, it's not all of D&D. It's not 20 levels of game, but it's got a lot of stuff that's going on there. I think that really works. Cairn has Kettlewright. Cairn is a very lightweight, old school style RPG. It has an entire character generator in it where you can build your characters. It's got all of the rule set is available, so you can download the entire rule set for Cairn. Again, you can send it to your players. And the player's guide for Cairn, the physical version is dirt cheap because it's a single paperback black and white book. Very cheap to produce. You can order a bunch of them. In fact, the Cairn box set, if you buy the Cairn box set, includes 4 copies of the player guide so that you can give it out to your friends when you're playing, right? He's thinking it through. This is Yohai Gal, right? Yohai Gal is thinking it through. He's thinking through the difficulties of getting players around the table to play, right? Cairn does a really, really good job at that. Index Card RPG. I've talked about ICRPG before, and Index Card RPG has not only free quick start rules to get to play. This is by Runehammer Games. Not only has their quick start rule book, but just recently came out with the Index Card RPG player's book, which is $5 for the print copy. $5 for a print copy of this, right? The PDF and softcover version sent to your door, $5. If you want to play index card RPG, it's very easy to say, you know what? I'm going to drop $25 and I'm going to have PDFs and print versions of the player guide for every player at my table, even if your players are not on board. And recognizing the fact that GMs tend to foot the bill for a lot of this stuff. This is our opportunity to say, I'm willing to drop $30 to play this game. You know, and can you ask for your friends to pay? Sure, right? And maybe you say, like, if you want to keep the book, drop me a $5, right? And we'll do it. So, you know, really, he's thinking it through, right? He's thinking it through. He's thinking through the difficulty of getting your players to drop onto new RPGs and the cost that's associated with it. And $5 for print version. That's some of the best. That's, you know, some of the best that I've ever seen. The Shadowdark Quickstart guide, right? So the Shadowdark Quickstart guide I talk about on this show all the time. I think it's one of the best products in role playing games, right? I think it's $20. That includes the Quickstart guide and the Quickstart player's guide. It's not the full book, right? It doesn't have all the class options, but it's got a lot to be able to play Shadowdark. So over on the Arcane Library store, they're currently sold out. And that tells you it's because it's a really good idea, right? Or they didn't print enough of them, I'm not sure. But either way, it was a 4-pack of the player Quickstart zine, right? So this is a staple bound, beautiful. I have it. This is my go-to con kit. I have this. I don't bring separate ones, 4 separate ones with me. It was $20, $20 for 4 copies of this. Really good, right? Really good, you know, really good price and a great way to kind of get your group on board. They're sold out, unfortunately, but you know, that's what I get. Now, the PDF is free. Right? So you can at least get the PDF to people and you don't have to monkey around with the Google Share thing that I was talking about before because they're free. So you can send the PDFs to people. You can, you know, the PDF is meant to be free. So Shadowdark does a really good. Pirate Borg, I don't think it's available yet, but they have a $25 player guidebook. So again, well, this is kind of interesting because I went to play Pirate Borg at GameholeCon and had a wonderful time. I really love Pirate Borg. Really, really fun game. The fellow who made Pirate Borg, wonderful dude. And but when I went to play, what was really interesting is they have you build characters at the game to kind of show you what it's like and to build a character on the play. They don't use pre-gen characters. I think they probably should use pre-gen characters, but they didn't. And they didn't give it to you, but everybody was lent a copy of the core rule book to be able to build their characters. They had piles of these things up. I was like, man, that cost is not cheap, right? But apparently they kind of learned from that a bit, and they're doing a player guidebook, a separate player book that's just for players for $25. That includes PDF. $25 is pretty expensive. The book quality is really, really nice, but it's not so bad, right? That price is still pretty low. It's lower than the $60 that I'm going to need for like the 13th Age or the Shadow of the Weird Wizard core books. So there's something to be said for that. So MCDM has the Dillian Tomb available for $10 in PDF. So not quite free. It'd be very cool if it was free. However, one PDF of this, one purchase of it is enough for all of the materials you need to be able to try out Draw Steel with your entire group. So very good price, very, you know, printable material, very good price to be able to try out that RPG. These are just some of them. Now there's a whole other angle to this, right? And this is one where like you hear me complain about D&D Beyond and the lock-in of D&D Beyond. But this is one area. And to give a full disclaimer, I like to always give my disclaimer when I'm talking about stuff from publishers that I have worked with in the past. I have worked with Wizards of the Coast over the past 15 years. I've been compensated for the work that I do with Wizards of the Coast, and they regularly send me free preview copies of the material they have. And for D&D Beyond in particular, I have a D&D Beyond insider account that I've had since well before Wizards bought it that gives me access to all of the material that's available in D&D Beyond. So with that disclaimer, I can talk more about D&D Beyond. This is something that D&D Beyond does really well at, right? This is the one area, like I know the lock-in. I don't like vendor lock-in. I don't like that that you're buying a limited license to the material. You're not actually getting material. I've talked about that before. You know, if you want to hear about it, I'll link to my article about why D&D Beyond is not a fair platform compared to like things like PDF. However, being able to share material is a really big deal. And I think that that's one of the things that makes D&D as popular as it is only one person needs to buy a product on D&D Beyond for multiple groups to be able to use that material in their games. Right? They've recognized the value of making it as easy as possible. They talked about this in recent interviews that the design team on D&D Beyond has talked about this, that their goal is to make it as easy as possible for people to get in and play the game. right? And they're doing a really good job by having a tool where once you have bought your limited license to the material, you can share that material with numerous players for building characters, for looking at the material, for building the backgrounds of the characters, doing all that kind of stuff. And they're not the only one. So Demiplane is another online platform that allows for the same thing. In fact, most of the virtual tabletop platforms that I know of allow for this kind of sharing. And that makes it really easy to share material, including, I think, like Shadow the Weird Wizard and 13th Age, the two that I've been complaining about. I think for systems like Foundry, when you have the rule sets in there, players are able to kind of get all of the stuff that they need in order to be able to play that game without having to buy a full copy of the rule book. So this is one where those online platforms, Roll20, Demiplane, D&D Beyond, Foundry, Fantasy Grounds, these platforms do a good job of allowing people to share the information and share the material of a role-playing game when they're playing. Those have that Settlers of Catan-like experience where you really only need to buy one copy of the game, one copy of the set of the books, and now you can share it with your players. And I wish there were more options for that for in-home play. And when we're thinking about physical material, Alchemy VTT also does this, like allows for the sharing of material. That's one area where it works really well is online. So where do we stand? So for publishers, if you're a publisher and you're listening to this, really think about what it takes to get the players on board to be able to play a game. Try to get as much material into the hands of players as you can for free and make it as accessible as possible for players to play the game. The GM is the one footing the bill for your product. They're going to buy the other stuff. They're going to buy the copy, but try to make it as easy for the GM as possible for the GM to get the players on board with your game, especially if you can, finding some way of getting the equivalent of the player guide into the hands of players for free or for really cheap. Really good deal. If you want to see models of this, take a look at what Daggerheart did. Take a look at what Index Card RPG has done. Look at those games. Look at what they've done in order to get players on board easily into the game. If you are a GM, think about what it takes to get players on board and recognize the fact that your players are probably not going to want to drop $60 a piece on a core book for a game that you might not be playing that much, a game they don't know anything about. That's going to be a hard sell. Sometimes you're going to have to be the one footing the bill, or you can come up with these other crafty techniques for sharing information, like using the Google Drive trick of sharing it in Google Drive and limiting the ability to download. There's a link down in the show notes for information on how to do that. If you're playing online, you're probably in a much better spot because there's lots of ways to kind of share information online. If you're playing games that are shareable online, then you're in a much better spot. But yeah, think about how you can make it as easy as possible for players to get the information they need to run their games. And that may decide what kind of games that you play with your group. Who summarizes your last session's game? For a long time, I have proposed, and I continue to propose. I'm not changing my mind on this as part of this talk, but I've been exploring the idea more, at least exploring the question. But for a long time, I've been a big believer in the advantage of asking your players to summarize the previous session's game. And I have a bunch of reasons why I think it is valuable to have players summarize a previous session. One is it helps them engage in the world, right? It helps the players remember that they're part of the world and they get to engage with it, not just by listening, but by talking about it. It's another way to get something off the GM's plate, right? If you can have your players summarize the game, it's something that you can kind of turn things over to them, and it's something that you don't necessarily need to do. It shows you what the players remembered about the game, right? It shows you what they are finding important enough to remember. It helps you know what they remembered correctly and kind of points out things that they might not have remembered correctly. If you need to fix it, it's your opportunity to say, actually, no, this is what is the case because it's going to matter later, right? And sometimes it might not matter and you can just let it go. It tells you like who they thought was important, or it tells you what they thought their characters did that really mattered to them. So it's a great way of seeing the player's perspective on them. It reinforces and rewards those players who take notes. That taking notes, I think, outside of supporting your fellow adventurers and building characters that are intended to engage in the sessions that the GMs are bringing, I think good note-taking is a master skill, a very, very good skill for players to work on and players to pick up. If you are a player, those are my top 3 tips for players, right? Build characters that are intended to support the other characters at the table. Build characters that are intended to engage in the game and the session and the story that the GM is bringing. And 3 is take notes. Take good notes. And when you take good notes, you can do good summaries of the game. And one of the things that player summaries do is it gets players talking instead of listening, because it's really easy as a GM for you to be dictating everything and you just to be talking a lot. And this is your opportunity to stop talking, start listening, and let players drive some of it. But player-driven summaries aren't for everybody. So one of the things I did in preparation for this little chat today is I did a poll up on YouTube. So this is not a perfect representative. You don't have to email me about representative samples and all of that, but it was a lot of people. And it's a good representative sample of the people who bothers to read my posts over on YouTube or engage in YouTube. And it was a lot of people. It's 2,000 people. Of the 2,000 surveyed GMs, about 3 in 4 of them said it was better for players to summarize the session. And about 1 in 4 said GMs should do it. Now, that's not to say, therefore, it's proven that players should do it, right? It's just saying 3/4 of the people thought players should do it and 1/4 thought GMs should do it. Well, in that 1/4 was a particular individual, Chris Perkins, who wrote this back in 2011. He said, "Some GMs rely on players to provide the read cap. Having tried it as a DM and experienced it as a player, I think that's a mistake. Left to their own devices, players will often focus on the wrong details or get the facts wrong or phrase the recap in a way that doesn't reinforce the atmosphere you're trying to invoke. The recap is the DM's best tool to get the session started on the right foot and to immerse players in the moment." Now, he's not wrong. Right? This is not a right or wrong kind of situation, right? You have to make a choice for you and your group, and you as a GM get to decide what you think is the best way. Is it better for you to clarify atmosphere and, focus on important facts and make sure the details are correct? Or are you a GM that wants to kind of hear what the world sounds like from the players of their fun? Now, first of all, it's important to note that Chris Perkins wrote this in 2011. So this is 15 years old, right? Oh, by the way, you can find this quote in a PDF called the DM Experience. This is a PDF available right now in EN World as an attachment over on EN World. I will link to it below. It is a copy of all of the PDFs is a copy of all of the articles that Chris Perkins had written as part of his DM Experience. It's a fantastic set of essays that is no longer available from Wizards of the Coast directly. They no longer serve those articles up. So they are now in one big package, and you can pick it up from that big package. And I will link to that down in the show notes. So he wrote this a while ago. I'd be curious to think how he feels about it now. Does he still feel the same way? Has he seen other ways of doing it? Has he changed his mind at all? I don't know. But it's not necessarily incorrect. However, I think that, one of the ways to kind of think about this is if the players focused on the wrong details in their summary, that means they didn't pick up what you told them the first time, right? If they got the facts wrong, what was the cause of that? And I think understanding that situation, to me, is more important than you reciting the things again, because you can always do it. You can always fix these things. I think it's more valuable to figure out where they've either steered away from it and help them fix it, or maybe you don't, and maybe they picked something up and went in a different direction, and you're like, you know what, that's fine too, because the story hasn't evolved yet. So maybe that's okay. He brings up the other point. The recap is the DM's best tool to get the session started on the right foot. Well, I also believe in this, although I put it in a separate place called the strong start. And for me, the session recap is a good way to kind of get people to start paying attention to the game and start working together. Because a lot of times one player will start reciting it, but other people will jump in. Now you've got the group working together, and that's really good too. They're all filling in their pieces of the story, including you. You can too. And then once the summary is done, then you hammer them with the strong start. Something happens. Now that we know where the characters are, something happens. What is it that happens? What draws them into the current situation that's going on in the game? I think that is really important. I think Chris Perkins clearly thinks it's really important. And we can still do that even if we have the player-generated, if we have a player-generated summary. So the whole reason this topic came up is over on the Sly Flourish Patreon Discord. Somebody brought up that they have started to, as part of their prep, write their session recap up in their prep. And they used this Chris Perkins quote as the example of why they wanted to do that. And I'm not telling them they're wrong. I think that's a fine way to go, right? I think if it really helps you, because it can, like if you're summarizing what things have happened, that kind of gives you, in the same way that reviewing the characters kind of puts the characters in your mind, reviewing what happened last time can kind of tell you and aim you towards the things that you want to prep for the rest of your session. But I also still believe that it's very valuable to have the players go through the summary. It's never a perfect experience. Usually when I ask who wants to summarize last session's game, which is a statement I have now said hundreds and hundreds of times in my games, a lot of time what I get back is silence. But I let the silence sit there, and then usually somebody steps up and says, I think we were at wherever. And I might give them a little hint about where they started. So one of my new little tricks recently is to say, as you stand there at the outside of the woods, overlooking the Temple of Lada, knowing that you're on your way to go save the Sultana from the assassins of the Dread Sultan, your mind goes back to the events that brought you here. Who would like to describe what happened in last session's game? That's my intro statement. That's probably going to be the intro statement I give here in about an hour. And that's usually enough. And then usually it sits, and then everybody usually waits to see if somebody else is going to jump in. And then eventually somebody says, well, it began with this, right? And do they have a perfect narration of it? No, not usually, right? But I'm still able to get back what they've got. And honestly, we're not all there to just share perfect prose. We're there to enjoy the game. So that's how I feel about it. I am still on board with the player-driven summary, but I am very curious to hear your own experiences for it. So feel free to leave a comment or send me an email or jump over on the Patreon Discord server for Sly Flourish Patreons, and let's chat about what you like and don't like when you are either having players summarize the last session's game or you yourself are summarizing last session's game. What works for you? You don't have to knock the situation as a whole. I am curious what works for you, what have been your own experiences with it, and how has that shaped your view into this topic. Every quarter on Sly Flourish, we have the Sly Flourish Patreon Q&A. Patrons of Sly Flourish can post a question, an RPG-related question every month. Every Friday, I go through all of the current questions and answer all of them, and then some of those questions I bring here to the show so we can dive in a little deeper. Kreger says, as part of a session 0, would you consider establishing with your players that you will not commit NPC betrayal? Perhaps by laying the groundwork of the heroic spark or shady vibes for NPCs. Reading the Obsidian Skull adventure in City of Arches, I see a line that Zesh wants to keep the relic, and I could guess that my players will say, "Oh, that's weird. Why does she want it? Maybe she's a cultist." And that made me consider this as a session 0 rule. Could you still allow you could still allow for fun reveals like this adventurer you met with the heroic spark turns out to be Queen Kassara. Spoiler. So the players may suspect an NPC is keeping something hidden, but can trust that I won't pull a lame betrayal. So yes, I think there's lots of things you can do. And this comes back to probably one of my top GM tips, which is sometimes just tell them. Right? You can just tell them sometimes. And you bring up a really good one, which is like Rosalind Zesh. Rosalind Zesh is sort of a shady NPC. So Rosalind Zesh is the spy master for the City of Arches. And throughout my own campaign, Rosalind Zesh would often say things like, hey, I'd like you guys to go get the Key of Worlds, but I want you to bring it to me. I'll keep it in safekeeping. Or, hey, I know you have the phylactery, I know that you have the soul vessel of the Nameless King. How about we keep it? Don't destroy it. Just keep one of them, just in case we need it later. And the players were always like, nope, we are destroying that thing, right? And I made it clear to them. I'm pretty sure at some point during the game, I made it clear to them, look, Rosalind, here's what you understand Rosalind Zesh to be coming from. She is an ends justifies the means kind of person. She is not going to directly betray you or betray the queen. She is 100% loyal to the City of Arches. She is 100% loyal to the queen. However, she is a big feeling that even weapons of villainy can be used for good. So she's like, and I was explaining this to Michelle, we were chatting about this on my walk today, and I thought about it like, imagine, it's a little bit like Boromir. Right? Not as bad as Denethor. Denethor, he was gone. Woo, right? He was out there. But Boromir's like, man, and there could have been a little bit better explanation for that in the movies, right? That Boromir's like, look, and he says it. He's like, people are dying, right? We're at war every day. You're not there, right? We're at war every day. We're fighting back the orcs every day. And you get to see that later, right? But he's like, any weapon we could use that would help save lives, why wouldn't we use that? Right? And you're like, that's not a bad thing, right? And Gandalf is like, no, you want to use it for good, but it'll turn you evil. It's like, look, that's a problem for tomorrow. My brother is out there right now fighting and dying because I can't use this, right? And he says it, but you never really buy into it. But like, what if Galadriel said that? Like, what if Galadriel's like, well, I'm really strong. couldn't I control it for at least a while? Like maybe I can control it just long enough to get rid of Sauron, right? Maybe I can just do this, right? And that's where Zesh was coming from, right? She's like, I know it's dangerous, but I know what I'm doing, right? And maybe there's a way. And the player's like, nobody knows what they're doing when it comes to this. We're going to destroy it. And they did, and she accepted that. So I think that it's important to talk to your players about this. It's important to give hints. You can give the no NPC betrayal, and you don't even have to make it part of the session 0. You could just clarify, look, all these quests that you're going on, that Rosalind is sending you on, she's not going to betray you on these. Like if the players start to like feel like that's going to happen, they start to talk, I don't know if I trust her. What if she's sending out these missions? You can say things like, you are pretty confident she's not, and out of character, she's not. Right? You can go ahead and make these like hard line things. Again, you just don't want the story to completely derail because the players think that you might screw them with a character, but then you cannot screw them with that character. If you tell them, no, this person is not, I'm not going to, now it's trust between you and the players, and you're violating their trust. You're nothing to do with characters. Player to players, right? DM to players, GM to players. You are going to break their trust with you if you, outside of character, lie to them about an NPC. So you definitely don't want to do that. So the heroic spark idea is fine, right? It's saying like they're shady is good. But, I usually just dial it up to make it real. If they're shady, I don't have to explain to the players that they're shady. They know it. And I will also let players talk about things like, we have this person, and like Rosalind Zesh, and we can't, there was never really a point where they thought that Rosalind was a bad guy, right? Or that she was evil. They pegged her pretty easily as like, she's kind of like Batman, right? She's kind of like, she'll use all of the tools that she can to do what's right. And it could get her into trouble. Right? It could get her into trouble if she does this. So I think that there's, I think that to me, the big one is just tell them, right? Clarify. If it's leading the wrong way, you can just tell them. Otherwise, you let it play out, but you can make it clear to the characters that something is not true. But I think you can definitely wire into your session 0 if you want, but you could also just do it anytime during the game and just clarify where the characters are coming from and recognize the fact that their characters would know this, but also that way you're not derailing the game. Eric F. says, could you discuss procedural play? I noticed OD&D and BXD&D often talk about built-in procedures to help the DM crank through various tasks and encounters. Dungeon World seems to be very procedure-driven. I notice more people talking about procedures in various OSR Discord servers. Do you think following a set of procedures is helpful, overrated, underused, etc.? Following a set of do this, then do this, then do this is appealing to a new DM and as someone who still spends hours and hours to prep one game. Oh, my friend, I have advice for you. I have a book that I could offer you to help you with that. Is there, if there were a set of procedures for dungeon creation, dungeon crawling, overland creation, overland crawling, encounters, etc., would that make things easier? Yes, I think procedures are great. I think we should hang on to procedures as long as they were valuable to us, and then let them go when they're not. So that, to me, is the real key. And I'll give examples of this. There are definitely procedures that I follow for running dungeon crawls or running infiltrations and heists or running, and you can see some of these in articles that I have on slyflourish.com where I talk about different adventure types. And for the adventure types, there are procedures. What's the procedure for exploring an underground cave? Who is up front? Who's in the back? Who's got the light source? Who is sneaking ahead? If they're sneaking ahead, like what's that process like? And walking through that, right? Dungeon turns, the idea of having those sort of 10-minute dungeon turns, that if you want to do a thing during a dungeon turn, it takes roughly 10 minutes. And during that 10 minutes, things could happen like random encounters. That's a procedure that's in place. Overland travel, whether you're traveling by hex or whether you're doing travel along the way, you could have a procedure for that. So there's lots of different procedures that lots of different games include. Some of them have it wired very tightly into the game. Dolmenwood, probably more so than any other RPG I know, has clear sets of procedures for exploration, for downtime in towns, for smoking weed, for doing all kinds of stuff. It's got a whole set of procedures for how to play that game that are wired into the game. And if you're playing that game, it probably behooves you to use those procedures when you're starting. Some games really don't have a lot of procedures. I would argue Daggerheart is kind of on the other end of the spectrum. There is no exploration rules for Daggerheart. There is no dungeon crawling rules for Daggerheart. There's downtime, right? There's kind of general downtime procedures for Daggerheart, but not like what do you do when you're in town versus what do you do when you're somewhere else. There's not a lot of frameworks in there for these kind of procedures. Instead, their procedures are very much built on the improvisational play and the kind of conversations that take place when you're rolling like the duality dice and stuff like that. So they have kind of a different set of procedures that they offer. As you bring them, Dungeon World, as an example, has very clear procedures. The idea of moves, you have character moves, you have GM moves, and those moves are the things that move the game forward continually, right? Like that's the whole of Dungeon World is built on moves. Everything is a move, right? Like everything that's going on is a move, and that is a clear set of procedures. So there are many procedures, particularly procedures that are not connected to game mechanics, but instead are connected to in-world things. What is it like to travel? What is it like to camp? What is it like to be in town? What is it like to explore a dungeon? Where those are transferable between different RPG systems, whether fantasy RPG and whatnot. You can kind of move those procedures around. You can run the same kind of 10-minute dungeon turns, whether you're playing Shadowdark or whether you're playing D&D 5e. It's going to be different though. Like exploration rules, same way. You can do hex crawling and exploration rules the same way that you do with Shadowdark, that you might with old school essentials, that you might do with D&D or D&D 5e or D&D 2024. But there's a difference that some of those games, like high heroic fantasy games, like D&D 5th edition, and D&D 5th edition for me includes both 2014 D&D and 2024 D&D. I don't play in the D&D 5.5 world. That's somebody else. You can call it whatever you want, but I'm calling it D&D 2014, 2024. In those worlds, like the tools that the players have change what those procedures are like. If you have the ability to cast the light cantrip, you don't need to have the procedures of torchlight that you do in Shadowdark. If you have clerics that are able to cast, or druids with Goodberry, or clerics that can do purify food or create food and drink, you no longer have to worry about like going out and hunting and foraging and getting the foods and everything like that. You now just sort of have that. That changes the procedures. You might still have some procedures, but some parts of those procedures are different. Travel, if you can teleport and fly, are very different than travel if you're walking on land, right? So those procedures can change. So what I argue is procedures are great, but you should be happy to throw those procedures away if they're no longer serving you and your players and the story that's going on. If you're running Out of the Abyss, the old D&D 5th edition, I think it was the second major adventure, the third big campaign adventure that came out for D&D 5th edition, it starts off with crawling through underground passageways where food is hard to get a hold of, weapons are very infrequent, light it could be difficult, and all of that. But then eventually you get to the point where it's easy to find food, it's easy to, you have good weapons, you have good access to spells, and now you can change the procedures. You no longer need to go through all those steps over and over again because the steps are automatic for a lot of people. So then you're just like, we're going to skip this part now, and now we're going to move the procedures to something else. So use the procedures when they're useful and throw them away when they're not. One last thing I want to talk about on this, though, is the procedures for prep. There's a reason, I've talked about this previously. There's a reason why I think the 8 steps from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master are as popular as they are. And there's a few reasons. But one of the big reasons is it's a procedure and people like procedures. It's 8 steps. You go through step 1, you go through step 8, and you've got stuff. People change their procedures depending on what they're doing. People change what they do inside of each step. I do it all the time. But I always know the steps. I've got an outline. I follow the outline. My prep is done, right? And I've done it hundreds of times on the show that I do on this channel, the Lazy RPG Prep Show, or Lazy GM Prep, where I go through those steps. And I walk through them and I get my game. And like I did it today and it was great. And now I've got it in the print. It's on the printer behind me. And I'm going to take it upstairs and play the game later today. And I felt good because the steps are done, right? I went through my steps. I did all 8 steps and we're ready to go, right? And again, the 8 steps are not perfect for everybody or every game or every situation. You have to tailor them in order to fit the situation that you've got, just like you tailor your procedures depending on what kind of game you're running. But we like the procedures because they give us the steps that we need to get somewhere. And sometimes in this wide open world of RPGs where you can do everything you want and anything is possible, right? Sometimes we need clarification. And just even if we know that we can break the boundaries, sometimes it's useful to just have some boundaries, to have some steps, to have some understanding of a way to approach this, I think is really valuable. So yes, I'm a big fan of procedural play, big fan of procedures. And I'll give you a little secret hint. My next big project, this is a big part of it, right? This understanding of procedural play and how it relates to things like the 8 steps is a big thing that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about. So great question. Jason K says, I understand that the basic anatomy of a situation is NPC plus motivations plus obstacles. However, I have a hard time finding a sweet spot between it becoming railroady and pre-plotted scene, and not just be cohesive enough to encourage an interaction. I don't know if it's just my mindset or if I'm lacking an understanding about how to create engaging and open-ended situations. How do you create and present situations that actually work? Really good question. So I have a few this is another thing I've been thinking a lot about. So over on Sly Flourish, I have an article called Build Single Encounter Situations, which kind of gets to that model that you were talking about, which is, for me, a situation. And what I like to think about is like, it works really well if you think about travel. You're going from point A to point B. You're going from one city to another city. Along the journey, something happens, right? You have a scene along the way. That to me is kind of the ideal when we talk about procedures. The procedure for me is, I like to say that you're traveling from one place to another. Along the way, something happens, right? That's my procedure. Something happens along the way, and a single event that occurs between two places. And it's a single encounter, and it involves a situation that's going on that the players can get involved in or not, right? They can kind of decide what they're going to do with it. It's not just a random encounter where they get ambushed along the road in the camp. And for me, a situation has a few things going on. One, a location. Where does it take place? What makes that place interesting? What's a monument to that location? What signs of a particular faction might surround that location? That's one big part of it. Who's there? Who are the inhabitants? An easy way is you roll on an encounter table. A more advanced way that I really like is roll on an encounter table twice and mix the results. Right? And then 3, something is going on there. What's happening? And if you roll twice on an encounter, a lot of times you can sort of build what's going on there. So the first one is like, monuments and landmarks, creating this landmark in the Lazy GM resource document. I have a list of different tables that you can use to kind of generate a landmark. A monument could be like, and I'll give an example from a recent game I had of a standing stone with a bunch of holes in it. And when you look through the holes at night at a certain time, you can see stars that it's aligned with this celestial entity of the hunter, right? It's kind of connected to the astrological sign of the hunter. And now you learn something about it, and that's kind of neat. You go, oh yeah, like it's an old standing stone of the hunter. And maybe one of the characters has a background that's connected to the hunter, and you go, you feel energy coming from this. It makes you feel good about yourself, right? Or whatever. But you have an interesting landmark to it. Then you add your inhabitants. It could be one, it could be multiple. I really like rolling twice and getting the results. But then you set up the situation. And there's a few things you can do for the situation, which I think is the crux of this particular question. And one of the questions is, what are they doing? And there's a trick of either, I have a little die table in this article where it's like they're sleeping, eating, preparing the camp, guarding, hunting, or preparing for battle. Another trick, though, is to use what I call the tableless oracle die. The tableless oracle die is you roll a d6, and the less extreme, the lower you roll, the less extreme is their reaction. The higher the roll, the more extreme. 1 would be sleeping. 6 would be conducting a sacrificial ritual. Right? Or doing something else, right? They're engaged in battle. And you can kind of see how the 1 to 6 plays out here. You can also do it for a reaction, either to the characters or maybe to themselves or to another group. Are the two groups hostile to one another, or are they two groups working together on something? And then you can kind of say, well, like, what are some other activities they could be working on there? And this is actually kind of the same as the quest list that you might offer if you have a random set of potential quest options for your players, which I have in the Lazy GM's resource guide. You could roll on that and kind of determine what quest the inhabitants are working on. That can work really well, right? So you can use it's like a quest table for inhabitants. But I do have a list here of like extended things that the characters might, or that the creatures might be doing there, like searching for treasure, building something, engaging in a ritual, arguing, taking prisoners, researching the area, hunting for something, protecting someone, preparing for war, and so on, right? Different things that they're doing. So this table can kind of help you, this list here can kind of help you get an idea about what they're doing there. And then attitude the same way, right? Their attitude, you can roll an tableless oracle die. But then I have this thing called the draw, or the hook, right? And here, the fishing metaphor for the hook really is apt. And it's because you want to dangle something out there that the players might want to grab onto to engage in the situation, but you don't want the hook to be so strong that they feel they absolutely must, right? So an example would be, to me, a good hook, and I made this one up while I was talking with Michelle earlier, but like, let's say you see there is a megalith of the previous druidic groups that used to operate here, right? There's a great kind of megalith, old megalith on the side. So now it's kind of interesting. Oh yeah, it's a druidic megalith. That's neat. And at the druidic megalith, you can see a boar, right? And an angry boar is fighting a group of goblins. The boar has glyphs on it that are glowing every time it gets closer to the megalith. Some kind of connection to the megalith, right? And the boar. And you're like, well, that's interesting. And the goblins are fighting it. But you can see around the goblins are symbols that they follow the orc general Maladuk. And the characters actually have an alliance with Maladuk, or they know they want to create an alliance with Maladuk. Maladuk is not just a villain orc that they're fighting. Maladuk is actually somebody they want to have a relationship with, or potentially a treaty with, or potentially some kind of alliance with. So now it's like, oh, do we fight the boar or do we save the goblins? I'm not sure. And then maybe one of the goblins is holding a chest. And there's a hole in the ground. You don't know whether they were burying the chest or just dug up the chest, right? Now there's another hook. What's in the chest, right? Now that situation's interesting enough that the players might say, okay, we definitely want to go down there. Now, like maybe the boar is a druid that's in boar form. Maybe it's just, a guardian of this thing and they, we don't know, right? We don't know what's going on there. But also what's in the box, right? Like we want to know that too. So, that almost might be too strong a hook. But the characters could still say, you know what? We got problem. We're going to go to the city. Maladuk's a problem for later. She'll never know that we saw these goblins before, and they might win, and everything will be fine. And by the way, life out here in the wilds is hard. So we're just going to leave it be. So they could they could pass on the situation. They don't have to get engaged, but they go, yeah, but we want to know what's in the box. And we also want to know what's going on with the boar with the glowing glyphs, and we want to know what's going on with the goblins. And you can decide what those things mean. But now you've created a situation. The players can decide how to get involved in it or not. They can choose which way they want to get involved in, and there's enough of a hook to bring them in. That, to me, are like the components that really put together an interesting situation. And you don't have to do it just for that. Monty Cook one time talked about how, the simplest adventure was an orc in a room holding a pie. Right. And it was the idea of if it was just an orc, you might just go in and shoot the orc, or you might go in, nowadays, you go in and talk to the orc maybe before you shoot him. But now the orc's got a pie. Well, that's a story. What's going on with that? Right. And there is that idea of what's the thing that you can throw into the encounter that just says this is different, right? The situation that's happening here, this is different. Something different is happening here. So that to me is the way to kind of build that situation. What's the thing? Where is it happening? Who's there? And what are they doing? Right? Those, and then what is there that might interest the characters enough to get involved? Not so much that they have to, but enough that there's some curiosity there about what's going on. That to me is kind of the key to the situation. Friends, I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today while we talked about all things in tabletop role-playing games. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, please consider subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It is absolutely free to sign up. You get a free adventure generator for signing up, and you get a weekly RPG-related article sent directly from me to you. No algorithms in the way. No trillion-dollar companies. Just me and you having conversations about role-playing games. You can also subscribe to the Sly Flourish podcast. It is absolutely free to sign up for the podcast, and then you get shows like this sent directly to your podcatcher. Again, no billion-dollar companies between me and you. No algorithms in the way. You get every show sent directly to your podcast player. You can also support me directly on Patreon. Patrons get access to all kinds of tips, tricks, tools, access to our Discord server. Hero tier subscribers get to see previews of the upcoming products that I'm working on. They're not a billion-dollar company, but there's a pretty big company there. But it's not algorithmic. You get everything sent directly to you. It's a really good deal. And you can pick up any of my books from the Sly Flourish Bookstore. It's a Shopify store, and they're like a billion-dollar company, so there is that. But it's still pretty much directly me selling products directly to you. So there's no algorithms in the way. There's nothing in the way. You can go and buy my books. Fantastic way to do it. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and get out there and play an RPG.